Hey, hello everyone, good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining this Women Being Talks number 11. So we are now getting to the first series of these events. And I would like just to let everyone know that this Saturday we are organizing a fundraising online concert in support of Edinburgh Women's Aid. So everybody is welcome to attend. We have 4 emerging artists from Edinburgh joining too, so it will be quite an intimate evening of music and poetry, spoken word. So if you would like to just, you can find the link for the event in our social media and our webpage. So I would would like to welcome Arianna Briganti, who is in Italy, and Lisa Settari, who is from Italy, but she currently lives in Belgium. And they are going to be the hosts for today. So you just go ahead, you introduce yourselves, and then get on with today's topic, that is behind a great man.
Yeah, very provocative. Thank you, Monica. Thank you once again for the opportunity. I think this kind of platforms are very useful to connect and reach out with people. And I'm very happy that Lisa is my pair tonight. Lisa, shall I start with introducing myself first? Yeah?
Sure, go for it.
Yeah, so my name is Arianna Briganti, and how to define myself? Well, I would say first off, I'm a mother of an adolescent daughter. So for those who are in the same situation, good luck to all of us. Tough times. I'm a feminist, and I'm also a development professional specializing in socio-economic development and gender justice. This means that I worked in places such as Afghanistan, Ethiopia, Georgia, Sri Lanka, and then 5 years ago, I moved to the Western Balkans, and I was living in Bosnia-Herzegovina and Albania. I was in Albania when the pandemic outbreak started, and I had to move to Albania back home, which is Italy, where I'm based at the moment. So I have 15 years of experience in the field, and my passion for gender equality and gender equity, and I think my constructive critique of the sector of international development led me to co-found my own organization, which is called Nove Onlus. Nove, it's 9 in Italian. And we work in Italy and in Afghanistan mainly. And I set it up with some women friends and experienced colleagues. And we used to define ourselves as caring humans. And we don't mean that in any self-aggrandizing way. We are just genuinely concerned for people's well-being and dignity, in particular for the dignity of women. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. So that's me for the time being. Lisa? The e-floor is yours, the virtual floor.
Real, okay. Well, now that I think about it, I'm thinking maybe I should have introduced myself first, because, you know, introducing yourself after after the introduction of someone with such a filled life, you know. But anyways, I'll use my young age as an excuse. So I am 25, almost 26. As Moni has already said, my name is Lisa Settari, and I am from Italy. I grew up in a small village in the north of Italy, and I'm currently based in Belgium, Brussels, where I am working with a Belgian non-profit organization which promotes and facilitates youth involvement in youth volunteering missions, really, and by extension also youth involvement in democratic institutions and democratic practices. And this is not directly linked to the topic of the talk or feminism as a larger topic, but I just wanted to add that I'm doing this thanks to a program which is run and also funded by the European Commission, and the name of the program is European Solidarity Corps. So I am more than happy to answer any questions relating to that after the talk, if any of you are interested in that, because it is a great opportunity for people between 18 and 30 to move to another country for a few months and to get involved in solidarity activities. And as a young feminist, I'm particularly grateful for the platform which is given to me by a woman being. I love how open the platform is, and yeah, the opportunities it gives you to, you know, connect with women who believe in the same values, and yeah, it's just great. Cool.
Yeah.
And Arianna, would you like to dive into the numbers, the realm of numbers?
Yes, I got stuck with your age, Lisa, sorry, but you're almost my daughter's age. And yet so engaged, and it's beautiful to see so many young women certainly, you know, joining hands when it comes to feminism. This is exactly what we need, young women and young men. Yeah, I would like to contextualize a little bit the situation before digging into the particular situation related to our country, to Italy nowadays. And I have a background in economics, but I don't like figures so much, so don't worry, I won't bother you with too many numbers. But I think that a couple of numbers are useful to really contextualize where we are at the moment in terms of women, in terms of the global gender gap. So looking at the World Economic Forum data, we have an overall gender gap around the world, which is pretty amazing, I would say, in a negative sense, of course. So there are the usual suspect here. For instance, the gender gap in sub-Saharan African countries is 102 years. So we need 102 years to be considered equal and treated equal as men in sub-Saharan Africa. Doesn't surprise too much, right? But then we have also Middle East and North Africa, 157 years. Okay, the usual suspect, as I said, but then North America, 168 years, North America. And going back home, let's talk about Western Europe. So European Union, we need 61 years to fill the gender gap, 61 years. Which means that I will be 104. I will be 104 years old because before I will be considered as equal as a man and treated as equal as a man. So these are shocking numbers, really. I would say that we know that women stand at the crossroads between production and reproduction, economic activity and care of others. Obviously, COVID-19 has underscored that tremendously. I would say that we stay between economic growth and human development. But what is this economic growth? Economic growth is associated with GDP. Not entering in any boring details, but I would like to draw your attention on what GDP and economic growth ignores. It's unpaid work of the sort of childcare, elderly care, cleaning and ironing, going for grocery shopping, cooking, homeschooling, for instance. So pretty much everything you've been doing from this morning, 6:30, 7:30, when you got up until now, it was leisure time. You've been unpaid and you've been unproductive according to GDP, okay? And this is a mere reality. I would also add that we know there is an infinite evidence of very recent data that shows that in capitalistic economies, some groups are more discriminated than others. We're talking about discrimination against race, religion, income, physical and mental ability, sexual identity, you name it. But among those groups, if we go and investigate that, we break it down, and we always find women. So the women are the most discriminated against because we're women, that's it. We know that there is a relationship between patriarchy and neoliberal economics, which are especially harmful to women. And when it comes to Italy is a patriarchal society. So we need to have this understanding before engaging in any discussion. The country, and not only Italy, I'm afraid to say, confines us to low-paid job and relies on women's unpaid care work. And this is actually the situation. On the top of everything, as we have noticed in the past 3 months, we are also exploiting natural resources and damaging ecosystem and diversity. And these are the very recent data from UN Women, for instance. Now, allow me to go to the very specificity of my country, and then Lisa, of course, will help me there. I would like to share with you 3 domains. The domains of power in Italy, the domains of money, and the domain of time, just to give you an idea of how women live in this country. Domain of power measures simply the gender equality in decision making, whether this is political, economic, or social decision making. Okay, Italy scores 47.6 in the European countries, below the average. There is a positive feature here. Economic power is progressing at a faster rate than the other EU countries. And so I was intrigued by the data and I said, okay, let me see how positive is that. So those are the data. 33% of women are on company boards, 33%, just because Italy introduced a legislative quota. Women parliamentarians are now 34%. It's positive because we used to be in 2005, 11%. So that's why now it's positive. And Italy in 2017 introduced legislative candidate quotas. Women among ministers, 22%. And it used to be 9% in 2005. When it comes to board members of research funding organization, women are deemed to be more studious. We have 70% there, but we have only 12% of members of the highest decision-making bodies of National Olympic Sport Organization. This is pretty lame. Let me go to the domain of money, which measures gender inequality in access to financial resources. As a woman in Italy, I earn 18% less than a man. If I'm married and I have children, I earn 30% less than a man. It's not good, huh? Domain of time, and we are now getting closer to what happened during the COVID-19 pandemic and the lockdown. Italy scores, when it comes to the domain of time, 49.3, below the average again. Very interesting, since 2005, there is an increased gender gap in the distribution of time spent on cooking and household. So instead of going forward, we are going backward. Women are 4 times more likely than men to spend time cooking and doing housework. In couples with children, like for instance in my family, 81% of women spend time on daily care activities. Now you can imagine what happened during the lockdown. This is really a grim situation. So just to give you an understanding, during the lockdown, the heavy workload ended up by having, for instance, less time for women to participate in public debates. Of course, we did not have time to show up because we had to do all the house work and the childcare. Plus, of course, we were all working, right? Women in academia in Italy published only half of their work in the first half of 2020 compared to 2019. So researchers like me, let's say, as a data, I couldn't even find the time to write anything and to publish anything. Women, of course, are losing their jobs in Italy big time. The majority of the women in Italy are employed in the tourism sector, hospitality, event management, and they are really facing joblessness. And women, of course, last but absolutely not least, are more vulnerable to domestic violence, and not only. And I will tell you something more about that later on. I would say that the government solutions are there, but they're insufficient. In Italy, we talk about the bonus babysitter and extra paternal leave. Parental leave, maternal and paternal leave. There is a number of women that are protesting nowadays in Italy because, as I said, this is absolutely not even close to solve the problem. There is a hashtag Half of It movement, which I endorse, and is asking the Prime Minister Conte to include gender equality and gender equity in the discussion about the recovery fund, and devote 50% of the recovery fund to women-related activities, sectors where women are more engaged, and businesses, entrepreneurship led by women. The point is that we always need to ask in our country, in our beautiful country. That's the point. And I would just stop here for a moment. And Lisa, I know that you have also very interesting data to share with us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. And I'll just add a few numbers that I found, and particularly, not even surprising, but appalling nevertheless. So there was a huge gap also between the number of women who work in sectors which are considered even more essential now during the COVID-19 crisis, and the number of women who are involved in either crisis management on the ground or in the public appearance of bodies who were founded to to handle the crisis and also to reassure the citizens. So, for example, women make up 70% of the workforce in the social and health sector. If you break that a bit further down, it gives you 56. Well, women make up 56% of all registered doctors in Italy, 77% of nurses, and then 65% of all health workers, which includes anything from nurses to researchers who are currently in the labs trying to come up with a vaccine against COVID-19. But interestingly, they only make up 15% of the directors of hospitals and smaller local public health institutions, which is just outrageous. And 72% of people employed in the education sector, which has also been massively challenged because of this new reality of homeschooling. No one has ever really thought about, how homeschooling could be implemented, no matter for which age group. And then all those teachers and education sector employees found themselves in front of this incredible situation. And 72% of them were women, so they were especially affected. And finally, last number relates to that is 69%. 69% of people in who work in the social care, in the broader social care sector, are women as well, and they have been obviously massively impacted by this rise in the need of social care. And interestingly, because I just mentioned researchers, I feel like this is not very vivid in the public memory. So I'd like to get back to this fact for a second. But on the 2nd of February, the health minister, the Italian health minister, who is a man, and his last name literally translates to hope. Speranza means hope, and his last name is Speranza. So I'm just hoping that is a good omen in some way. And he said that it was, quote, nice, that the three researchers who managed to isolate the coronavirus were 3 Italian women. And I agree, that is nice. And I just hope they will get the further recognition, and that the fact that they have proven how much female expertise and how much female excellence we have to offer as a country, and that will eventually lead to an improvement of the situation as it is. Something else that has been noticed by a lot of people, and which has also given way to a few different public initiatives for more female representation, was the fact that in the daily press briefings of the Civilian Protection Agency, and the sign language interpreter was the only woman who was present, and she was obviously not speaking with a voice because she was doing the sign language interpretation. And that was the case in all the press briefings that have been taking place for a few weeks, every night at 6 p.m. and which have been watched by millions and millions of Italian citizens. So it has had a huge impact on how citizens perceive the front line of anti-COVID fighters, so to speak. And then I've also had the opportunity to ask a representative of the regional Green Party from my home region about what she has made of the female presence in the regional COVID-19 response, or rather the absence of female representation. And she has actually sent me the results of a short survey that she and her party conducted. And they had a look at 46 press briefings, because at the regional level, regional councils have also given daily press briefings for a while. And my regional Green Party representatives, they've looked at 46 press briefings and counted the appearances, the male and female appearances in those press briefings. And a staggering 96 were male appearances, as opposed to 16 female appearances. I'll just repeat that. It was 96 male appearances versus 16 female appearances. And I think if you take a moment to let that sink in, that does make quite an impression. Yes, I think that's everything from me for numbers. Arianna, did you want to respond to anything directly, or?
Well, it just reminds me, Lisa, what you just said, of another incident which occurred a couple of days ago, and in terms of you know, the government gathering and talking around starting over after the emergency. We had another situation where the Minister Provenzano, who is the minister for the South and for the territorial cohesion, who noticed that at this meeting there were only men. So there was a high-ranking political discussion. There were prominent mayors, representative for academia. He has not noticed when he's been given the list of participants, there were all men. He noticed when he logged in and he saw all his colleagues there, and he refused to take part in the meeting. Now, there are two things that I find very interesting. He spoke about a removal of gender, and rightly so. There was a removal of gender. There was a representation of just half of the society, if not less. But in my country, you know, and I've been working abroad for 16 years, so sometimes I look at, you know, I look at Italy from like somebody that I wouldn't say is a stranger, but has a bit loose in touch with, you know, with the everyday's life. So I noticed that, and I said, how come that we are still there, you know, looking around, and we need to make sure there is a female present, there is a female representation there. First point. Second point, this got into the newspaper because he refused to sit at the table. So that's the point. The point, the scandal, it's not that there were no women. The point is that the one and only man that refused to sit at the table is, you know, the whys this is making into the newspaper, and I found that disappointing, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah. I completely agree.
Lisa,
and yeah, I mean, thinking,
I know it's difficult to talk about that as Italians, right? I mean, we know a country. We love a country. When you're abroad, you know, you feel homesick, and then you go back, or you read, you know, the papers, you see what is happening, and you kind of don't really make sense of what is happening right now. I know, Lisa, that, and I thank you for that, that you had this, you know, this interesting idea to call this talk Behind a Great Man. And I really like your provocative hint around that. And I think this says a lot about the mentality here in Italy. Of course, we can't generalize, and we don't want to generalize, but I think it's certainly a matter of a general societal struggle, really, to understand gender equality and gender equity. I know, Lisa, that you want to say something about that, your perception on that, right?
Absolutely. I'll actually just add one other small thing. But this is coming from someone who is from the north of Italy. Like in Italy, we have this, well, quite a strong north-south divide. And we Northerners are sometimes, you know, some people think, or like, you know, call us arrogant, and like, because the north is supposedly more modern, more progressive and everything. But I sign everything you've just said about sexism in our Italian society, and just wanted to say that that is true for Italy as a whole. I mean, the numbers from my regional Green Party councillor also support that we are not really doing any better than the southern regions when it comes to gender equality. So I just wanted to say that once and for all. And I'll continue on, say, like a slightly more positive note, perhaps, because one good thing is that Arianna and myself are not the only people, not the only women, who are angry about the status quo. And which brings me to the letter, the open letter that was written and signed by members of civil society, mostly women, but not only. Some men signed the letter as well, and it was directed at the Prime Minister and other leading figures in the COVID-19 response. And what the letter was asking for was basically more female representation, and just like various moves against institutionalized sexism, and patriarchal, practices and structures. And this is not at all, I mean, because what some people have said then was, we're living through a massive health crisis, and all those feminists are thinking about is political correctness and pink quotes, as they're called in Italy. So gender equality quotes. But this is actually not the thing, because this is not about political correctness, and it's not about identity politics. It's not about some women being selfish, or women who want to get into any powerful positions. This is literally about implementing constitutional principles, because the 3rd and 51st article of the Italian Constitution, had to look that up there, they specifically mention that sex cannot, that basically being a woman cannot be an obstacle, for people to be part of the country and any of the public institutions in the country. And it also says that the state has to actively remove obstacles. So this is not only true for like in terms of sex or gender. It also mentions other background related factors, such as what your first language is, because we have different languages in Italy, minority languages as well. And anyways, obviously, religion, sex, none of those things should stop you from being an actively participating member of any public institution. And there should be a balance in the representation, in democratic representation. So that is what the letter is about. And as I said, it was signed by women and men alike, more women, but also men. And it has, let's say, there have been representatives of different parties who have expressed their support for it, but I am curious to see if that will just, if they all stop there, or if there will be more political initiatives that will, be taking place in support of the message the letter is trying to get across. Else was there? Well, then on sorry, I thought I had it. Yeah, on 2nd of May, a virtual flash mob was initiated, and that was in support of the message of this open letter directed to the Prime Minister and other important figures. And it was very, very popular. I mean, thousands of people had already signed the letter by then. Individuals as well as associations, NGOs, and companies as well. And then, as I said, on the 2nd of May, this virtual flash mob took place. And if you just look for the hashtag Dateci voce, which means give us voice, on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, whatever, all the social platforms, you will find tons of pictures of women, and also men in some cases, wearing a face mask, which says hashtag Dateci voce, or, well, some of them also had were also holding up signs saying that, but that was the hashtag Dateci voce. And Arianna is going to say something about the formulation they picked in a second. Just wanted to add that, well, I don't think of myself as a particularly cynical person, but despite the attention which the letter got, and the flash mob as well, there were, for example, there were quite a few articles in the international press. The BBC was reporting about the letter and the flash mob, and even UN Women mentioned it in some of their publications. So people know about it. People talk about it in Italy and abroad, and there is substantial anger and frustration among Italian women and feminists. Otherwise, the initiative wouldn't have started and wouldn't have had so many supporters. But at the same time, I am very careful and don't want to get up my hopes too quickly. And that is even though different motions have been initiated in Parliament and also in some local councils in the support of more equal and more diverse representation in Parliament and in the local councils. So yeah, Arianna, I'm happy to hand over to you if you want to.
Thank you, Lisa. I would start with the Dateci Voce hashtag and give us voice. As a researcher, for me, language is important, and I understand the movement, and I absolutely concur with the necessity of using yet again another provocative hashtag like give us voice to underscore the problem. To be very clear, the problem in Italy did not present itself for the first time because of COVID-19, and this is obvious. The problem has been already existing a long time ago, and I call it institutionalized patriarchal power system. So I absolutely agree with Lisa about that. So the COVID-19 situation has exacerbated really an issue that Italy has been confronted with for a very, very long time. Now, this patriarchal system fosters all sorts of inequality, discrimination, sexism, and eventually violence. So when it comes to sexism and patriarchy, and when it comes to the usage of language, which is benevolent sexism sometimes, or hostile sexism, and I will provide you an example with that, I have something very clear in mind. So I do not need my womanhood to be legitimized by a patriarchal man, to ask somebody else to give me voice. I do have a voice by, and every other woman, of course, by default, because we exist. And I do not need to associate myself to a man to feel emancipated and empowered. And this is something that needs to be clarified, because in Italy we have a vast number of women as well that are not, I would say, with all the due respect, perhaps so self-confident in their identity as women, and need the patronizing attitude of a patriarchal man. And this is important when it comes to language, because our society uses very often a very abusive language when it addresses women. So saying I do not have a voice, we do not have a voice, be reminded that I can speak, or I have to raise my voice, otherwise I go unheard. It's not something that I agree with. You know, when I say, when somebody said, you know, for women, we need to raise our voice, it reminds me of my mother when I was in a, you know, child, asking me, you haven't heard me, well, you might want to clean up your ear a little bit more thoroughly, you know. So it makes absolutely no sense for me to believe that I need to raise my voice for something that is my right. So, as I said, language is very important, especially in the Italian context. We hear multilingual people, and I know, you know, when you're Italian abroad, you also get used to a different way of discussing feminism, discussing women issues, discussing gender issues as well. And then you go back to Italy and you feel a certain discrepancy, if you like, in the language that is used. Why? Because women, of course I can't generalize, but it's very widespread, are objectivized and dehumanized by using a language that society has legitimized and political figure has legitimized as well. So for instance, women are labeled and compared to cute animals. We use a lot, you know, bunny and mouse, and if you want to highlight a more active sexual life, we are wolves. So it's always, you know, close to the animal realm, and it's belittling, obviously. So we are talking here about benevolent sexism. So the Ministry of Health that says it's nice, 3 women, you know, in science did a tremendous, amazing job. Well, that's not nice. That's worth a Nobel Prize, if you ask me. And then there is the hostile sexism, and we can see it in, you know, various forums, including, of course, social media. We are labeled all sort of vulgar synonym for whore, and this is how we are addressed. So this is associated, according to me, with a distorted and unhealthy masculinity, based on control, based on oppression, and based on violence. I would like to give you an example, and this is an example of a mother that got in touch with the reality I did not know before, and this is about the consumption of pornography by young people. So my daughter is an adolescent, and I read, of course I'm very cautious about that, and I read data regarding regarding the fact that Italy is an avid consumer and producer of pornography and violent pornography as well. And the consumers are also adolescent, which is I have to say, you know, as a mother is scary. So in 2015, there were 22 studies in 7 different countries that tried to analyze and to clarify whether there is a correlation between consumption of pornography and aggressive behavior. Yes, there is. It seems to be a correlation between that. And this is associated with verbal as well as physical sexual aggression. Just to give you another number in the context, in 2019, Italy ranked 7th in the Pornhub's top 20 countries by traffic, 7th. And we all know what happened during the lockdown because Pornhub decided very generously to grant access for free to all its content, to everyone, basically. So my last grim data, and then I stop here. In 9 weeks of lockdown in Italy, 11 women have been killed by their partners. 9 weeks of lockdown, 11 women. Amnesty International Italy said, femicide is systemic in Italy. Now, I cannot tell you whether this is correlated. Okay, I do not have data. I do not have such a deep knowledge. I'm just sharing with you fact. Because I don't want to leave you on that very grim note, because there are also very beautiful things about our country and women in our country, and men as well, of course. If Monica helps me, I would like to share a video which is about New Zealand, just to have, you know, an understanding of how New Zealand is tackling pornography in their country right now, and the need for Italy maybe to look at that.
Matt, darling, there's some people here to see you. So he watches you online?
Yeah, you know, on his laptop.
iPad, PlayStation.
His phone, your phone.
Smart TV, projector.
Yeah, anyway, we usually perform for adults, but your son's just a kid. He might not know how relationships actually work. We don't even talk about consent, do we? Now we just get straight to it.
Yeah, and I'd never act like that in real life.
Yeah. Hey, Matty. You all right?
Okay, Sandra, stay calm. You know what to do here. All right, Matty. It sounds like it's time to have a talk about the difference between what you see online and real-life relationships. No judgment.
Many young Kiwis are using porn to learn about sex. Keep it real online. Get help and advice at keepitrealonline.govt.nz.
Thank you, Monica, also for helping me with that. I wouldn't have been able to do that myself, not very fluent when it comes to IT. Yeah, this is an very recent example of what New Zealand is doing in terms of counter-reacting to the consumption of pornography, especially by kids. To my knowledge, this is not happening in my country, and this is scary, especially because, as we have seen, there is a correlation between that, the way women are treated as objects, disrespected, dehumanized, and eventually women being abused and killed. Yeah, I hope, Lisa, you have something more rosy to share with us at this point.
Not quite sure about that, but I will say something that's directly related to the clip we've just seen, because I think, you know, the fact that, I mean, if you see this clip and if you learn through watching this clip, that even in New Zealand, a lot of young people learn about sex and relationships from the porn industry, and sometimes from, you know, really violent pornography, then you can only imagine what the situation like is in Italy now, with that background of well, sexism and you know, the patriarchal structure of our society that we've just been talking about. Well, Arianna and I had a brief chat about this yesterday, and as soon as she mentioned the consumption of violent porn in Italy, especially among young people, the first thing that came to my mind was that, together with the absence, or like frequent absence at least, of, you know, decent and systemic sex education, that is really not just you know, like a, you know, some kind of like a feminist niche worry. That is potentially a massive risk. I mean, we are risking for an entire generation to you know, to miss an opportunity to learn how to have healthy relationships, how to have a healthy body image, how to learn how to talk about certain, you know, basic and essential things in life, like emotions and sexual consent. Because there I speak from my own experience. So as I said earlier, I'm 25, so it has been a while since I was at school, and I'm not going to pretend that I've seen any of the most recent curricula from Italian high schools, for example. But what I remember, what really upset me about the way sex education was taught, if it was taught at all in Italy, is the fact that it really depends on the initiative of each school, and sometimes even of each teacher. Like that it just depends on, you know, individual initiatives whether you learn something about sex education or not. Because I remember that when I was in middle school, so around the age of 12, we did have a biology lesson where we read something like half a chapter about the female menstruation cycle, with our male biology teacher, who was very awkward, and all of us were really awkward, and I don't think anyone retained much from that, and it was all very, you know, super scientific. No one talked about period pain and about you know, emotional things, like nothing at all. And then I remembered that I went to this amazing afternoon module for about half a year, I think, when I was 13, which was led by a female teacher who had a background in social work, and she taught me and the rest of the group a lot about all those topics: consent, body image, feminism. She did hint at feminism. She didn't call it feminism, but now in hindsight, I'm like, oh yeah, I've heard about this thanks to that female teacher a few years ago. But then again, that was not mandatory. It was a voluntary afternoon module people could go to or not. It was only for girls, so boys didn't get any of that essential information, because I think all the topics we covered, you know, are essential information, like no matter what gender you identify with, or what your sexual orientation is. And obviously it completely depended on that individual teacher's initiative. So the absence of sex education, like systemic, regularized sex education in every single school, is a massive problem. And of course it doesn't really do anything to remove that massive taboo. Because I think, I mean, I grew up in a relatively open family, but still it was like, before I asked my mother or my older sister something, you know, related to any of those topics, I would think twice. And that is, you know, like a young person talking about a very, you know, loving family environment. So I can only imagine what it is like, you know, for people who grow up in extremely conservative, sometimes extremely religious families, or who don't have, you know, for girls who don't have any female family members they feel close enough to speak about those things. That and that remains a massive issue. Another number I wanted to share, which is related to what Arianna was talking about earlier, is that well, you did say that we're actually doing all right in terms of parliamentary representation, and so the number of female MPs has improved and everything. But one sector in which we are clearly struggling, especially compared to our EU colleagues, is the presence of Italian women in the workforce, because only 53% of Italian women are in the national workforce, as opposed to 73% of men. And if we look at the numbers over the past 25 years, we can see that the figure of women who are in the Italian workforce has only increased by 8% in 25 years. And that is not something we can tap ourselves on the back for, absolutely not. And then in December 2019, which is still, which was still quite recently, there was a big survey conducted in Italy by a think tank, and the question that was asked was, do you think that women should stay at home in order to take care of their families? And 1 in 5 respondents said yes, and that is women and men combined, 1 in 5, which I think is definitely not the same result you'd get in other Western European countries, let alone in the north of Europe. And another thing we briefly touched upon yesterday, Arianna, which is just a little side note, but I think it's nevertheless significant, is also that we have a bit of a lack of, powerful, strong, independent female figures in Italy, for young women to identify with, because we have had an impressive amount of prime ministers since the end of World War II, which is because our governments are so unstable that we hardly ever make it through the 5 years a government is supposed to last. So we've had 58 prime ministers since the Italian Republic was founded after World War II, and all 58 of them have been men. The same is true for all heads of state, the presidents of the Republic, they've all been men. And unfortunately, we also don't have any female, no queens or any other big Italian female figures we could look up to. That is everything for me, and I just wanted to say that I do completely agree with what you said, Arianna, about and the way in which you judge the Data Ci Voce hashtag, because I guess it does make sense, because they used they've chosen this name for the hashtag because they wanted to make a direct reference to the sign language interpreter, who was, as I said earlier, the only woman who was present at the daily press briefings about the COVID crisis. And she obviously didn't speak with a voice. So I can see the reason behind it, but I still think it's a problematic, if you're creating such a massive thing, I think, better go for a different hashtag. Personally, I would prefer the hashtag listen, because we have a voice and we are speaking. And even if we're not using our voice, there are other ways of expressing your opinion. And we all, every woman has, is able to do that in one way or another. So I would have preferred a different title, definitely.
Indeed. Yeah. Thank you, Lisa. Well, Lisa and I agreed that we want to end this talk by walking the talk, because we are both activists and we both turn what we are saying here into practice as much as we can, of course. So it's a contribution. And I would like to go with you to Afghanistan for a moment, and I would like you to think of yourself as a woman that does not have the possibility to go to school, let alone university. Sometimes you're not even allowed to leave your own house. But for certain positive circumstances, you are educated, you manage perhaps, to end high school and you would like to go to university, or you got a job, and you want to work Okay, so something that for us is taken for granted, like commuting, transportation within, you know, our cities, our towns, in Afghanistan is a big issue. We are talking here only about the capital city, because what is happening outside the capital city is terrible, even more than in Kabul. So the organization that I set up, for which I volunteer, start a project. It's a startup. Which is called the Pink Shuttle. It's a minivan which is driven by 4 professional female drivers, among the first in Kabul, the first in Afghanistan, trained by the project, because we also trained them to drive, of course. They got the license. And they set up, with our support, this startup, this business, and they are driving women, only women, throughout Kabul, women that need to go to university, need to go to high school, need to go to work. Why is that so important? I would say, okay, I take the bus, I go to work. I can't, because I'm harassed as a woman, so I can't take the bus, right? Maybe I have a little bit more money, let me take the taxi. No, because I'm harassed as well. I'm overcharged anyway, and I'm harassed by the male driver. And sometimes the male driver won't even pick me up. So what do I do? How do I commute? You know, I did so much in order to enroll in university or to get a job. I can't really go from A to B, you know? And there is this Pink Shuttle, this initiatives that we really fond of, because of the potential that it has to really brings about a transformational change in society in Kabul. And this is the sort of initiative that we have in order to contribute to women's liberation in a country like Afghanistan. It's very unfortunate, you know, to live there as a woman, to say the least. So this is a very small example of how Nove Onlus walks the talks and try to help women in Afghanistan, for instance, but also in Italy. In Italy, we found ourselves in this emergency situation, and Nove Onlus start distributing to women, single mothers with children, family in needs, homeless people, among which, of course, many women, food parcels. Of course, not alone with the Italian Red Cross. So there is, I want just to let you know that there is still a momentum, and there's a beautiful Italian civil society that works with women and for women, and the made of women. And I just want to, you know, share with you a message of hope. So it's not negative only. So this is when it comes to my experience of how to walk the talk. Lisa, I know that you are very active, super activist in Belgium, and you want to share with us something, right?
Yeah, well, I'm trying at least. So thanks, first of all, for your example. And I just love how, you know, I love to see how seemingly small actions, like a woman driving a shuttle bus, can literally change other women's lives, because it allows them to, you know, do what has to be done every single day in order to get a university degree, for example. So amazing. You're doing amazing work. Please keep it up, which I'm sure you will. And yeah, so I also just wanted to say that, I don't know, I'm obviously trying to see this whole COVID-19 crisis as a massive opportunity, which is not always easy, but, you know, in a way it is true. A crisis is always also an opportunity, and that is true especially with regards to Italy. I mean, at the moment we have the States General, which are currently meeting up in a beautiful villa outside Rome, where they're debating the future of the country. And States General probably makes you think of the French Revolution, which just, yeah, like makes you understand how fundamental a discussion that is, because we are literally trying to reinvent the country. And yeah, so that kind of, like, you know, helps me to think positively about all this, even though, as you said, with my everyday activism, I'm a bit more active in Belgium now, just because I find myself in Belgium. And I've kind of like grouped different ways of getting involved, say at, you know, on a daily basis at a grassroots level, into 3 groups. So there is petitions, local volunteering, and what I call local resistance. And so with petitions, I mean, we've just talked about how much how much attention this open letter and the flash mob, the virtual flash mob of Data Ci Voce received. So if you just Google Data Ci Voce, you will get to the official website, and the open letter is still there. You can sign it. You can of course look for other open letters, because there are quite a few open letters that have been directed at power holders in the recent weeks. And Data Ci Voce was only the one that got the most response. But do actively take 15 minutes out of your day. Do actively look for petitions and open letters and just sign them. It really doesn't take much time, and it might not be it might not kick off the next revolution, but it is something you can easily do to show your support for a cause. And of course, you can always start your own petitions on change.org, for example, which is just the first website that came to my mind. So do not hesitate to do that. And then something I feel very passionate about, also because it gives me so much, and I get so much back from it, is local volunteering. So here in Belgium, I'm currently involved with mostly two feminist organizations. One of them is called Garance, and they organize feminist self-defense workshops. And I mean, most of them are hands-on self-defense, like how do I kick someone if I do get attacked in a dark alleyway, like in all our nightmares. But they also have really cool workshops on, for example, like how to survive the Christmas dinner, because Christmas dinners, as I'm sure you all know, are sometimes camps of very, very heated debates, where feminists or, I don't know, vegans like myself really have to justify what they believe in. So they really work on self-defense and assertion on lots of different levels, and they do amazing work. And they do a bit of translation work for them voluntarily. And the other organization I'm involved with is called Vie Féminine, and they are a working class feminist association. They've been around for quite a few decades now, and with them I've been doing this conversation table in French once a week, and it was me and a French volunteer, and we basically met up with a group of Bulgarian women. Some of them have been living in Belgium for quite a few years, but for one reason or another just never really had the opportunity or felt comfortable enough to go to a formal French course. And so they've been missing out on learning one of the local languages, which has led to considerable isolation in some cases, and also just frustration, unhappiness, even mental health issues in some ways. And yeah, we've had to stop the conversation tables because of COVID-19, and then we started to send them videos. So we basically made a group chat on WhatsApp. So my French colleague and I, we did do our best to continue with the French inputs, and it's been so amazing to see how much confidence the women developed over the course of a few months. I mean, we have members in the group who at the start, were too shy to even repeat single words in French, and now they'll send us WhatsApp voice messages, just chatting away, which is awesome. And it has just once again, this experience has once again cemented this conviction inside myself of how important learning, not only language learning, but just learning in general, how closely linked that is to empowerment. So just women just gotta keep learning and try to see every day as a learning opportunity. And then the final point that I called local resistance in my notes is just if you feel comfortable enough, and this is something I've tried to practice, especially over the last few months. If you are being harassed, through catcalls or even just really creepy looks, if you feel comfortable enough, give them the angry looks back. Do speak up. Ask them if you can help them. Sorry, can I help you? Why are you staring at me? I've experimented with that quite a bit in bright daylight in Brussels, and it is very satisfying to do it. Even though you sometimes feel like you're just kind of on your own and trying to fight a giant, and it's definitely not the kind of feminist activism that will make you feel like you've changed the world if you do it a few times. But it has given me quite a lot of personal satisfaction, and I do believe that it is somehow, you know, planting seeds for broader social change. But obviously, only do it when you feel comfortable enough, because personal safety comes first. And that is it from me.
Thank you so much to both. There's a couple of questions here in the group chat that I'm going to read and ask you to answer. Madia Nadim asked, do you think it is time to reframe policies related to security in terms of pandemic by using feminist lens? Because world has witnessed the response and situation of countries run by females compared with those run by males. What's your opinion regarding this?
Arianna, do you want to? You just unmuted.
Yes, I was muted. Yeah, I mean, I think it's not a need; it's an urgency. I think we're already late, because certainly we need to address everything through a gender lens. Gender means men and women together, and we cannot exclude men from the discourse, and we cannot exclude women from the discourse, obviously. So everything needs to be understood, analyzed, debated using a gender lens. And I think my country is not there yet, unfortunately.
Yeah, definitely not. And I think if we think about the first policy proposals and also the definition of, you know, priorities, it's really easy to see that the first priority, well, I mean, to be fair to lots of different governments, the first priority to the governments in those countries who've had a strict lockdown like Italy was the physical health of people. Which is actually, you know, a nice surprise if you live in a capitalist society, because usually, you know, we're used to the economy, you know, being prioritized over anything else. So I am glad that physical health of people was prioritized for once, even at a high economic risk. But at the same time, mental health, for example, mental health has not had the attention and you know, the financial support that it has to have. And I think that would be different if more women were in decision-making positions, just because women in Italy and elsewhere do carry the, you know, the main burden of emotional labor. And if there are no, like, if there isn't an institutionalized mental health support, then it will be the women in the families and in the, you know, friend groups who will have to deal with that. And there, I mean, it's not just draining and extra unpaid work. It's also just I think it can be really dangerous to expose yourself to too much care work and too much emotional labor if you haven't been trained for it, because it's not like women are, you know, machines and deal with other people's problems and then just go about their own day again. That's just not how it works.
So much. The second question here was made by Parveen Kumari, and it's to Arianna. You talked about the stereotype women as cute animals mostly tamed. However, in media and in images, a woman with sexy body and attire is shown with lions, having lion's share in her hands. What does this image represent about women, and what will be the ideology?
Thank you for this question. It's not easy to answer these questions. I try to go back to analyze this situation in Italy, especially, and I discovered that there is so much I don't know about discrimination when it comes to women, and I'm reading a lot of literature that brings me back to ancient Greek, and gives me some understanding of how patriarchy and discrimination against women started. So it's a long journey. So when it comes to the association of women with animals, what I know is that when it comes to predators like lions, when it comes to, for instance, you might have seen a woman associated with an image of a snake, for instance, you know, it goes back to the fact that women should not be trusted, that there is a culture behind that tells us women are liars, women are predators, women cannot be trusted. So you work in solidarity with men. It's manhood against women. And this is what reinforces this unhealthy masculinity. You know, associating women, associating human beings with animal, as much as I love animals, is already wrong, is belittling, is dehumanizing. And we know very well what happened when you start dehumanizing another human being. We have seen it. We are witnessing right now, you know, what is happening in the United States, for instance, but what is happening elsewhere as well. So it reinforces these negative stereotypes around womanhood, and this needs to be understood. What makes me angry is when I switch on TV in Italy, and I still see this association. I still see the woman's body being shown as an object. Almost naked, always younger, almost a kid, and then associated with a language which is patronizing, belittling, offensive, to say the least. I don't know whether I responded to the question, to be honest, but this is my stake.
It was really, really good. Thank you so much. It was really insightful discussion, and it was really good to hear from you both. It's always a pleasure to see you both. I wish it was more often.
Yeah.
Great pleasure for, I'd say, both of us as well. Yeah. So thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, everybody, everyone who attended today. It was really good. Thank you. It's great that we are like we have now one woman being talk left. It's going to be held this Thursday at 5 p.m. too, and this one will have 6 speakers. It was something that we took a bit longer to prepare, and it's called African Perspectives, and because it was more difficult for us to get like voices from Africa to actually speak with us about the reality there that we don't really know very much in Europe right now. So once again, thank you so much, everyone, for being here. And it was great that we got like always a good number of people attending every talk. And it's really, really good to know that people enjoy connecting with us, and it's really important. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming. Thank you, Lisa. Bye.
Thank you, Arianna. Bye. Be safe, everyone.
Bye.
Yes. Bye. Take care. Ciao.
Ciao.
Ciao.